Yeah.
Well, good afternoon, or almost afternoon to everybody. I hope you've managed the time change okay. I'm still feeling a little discombobulated. My name is Olivia Rayner. I direct the Tarjan Center here at UCLA and welcome you all to our lecture series. I'm welcoming you also on behalf of our co-sponsors, the Center for Autism Research and Treatment and the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Research Center. It is my pleasure to welcome my friend and colleague, Elizabeth Laugeson, to speak with us today. And we're very lucky because she's a globetrotter, and I'm not sure how it is that we anchored her here to Los Angeles today, but I'm glad we have, and that she has this opportunity to bring her work to all of you. Dr. Laugeson is the training director at the Tarjan Center and is an associate clinical professor in the Department of Psychiatry here at the Semel Institute. She's also the founding director of the Peers Clinic, which is UCLA Peers Clinic, which is an outpatient hospital-based program providing parent-assisted social skills training for individuals with autism spectrum disorder and other social impairments across the lifespan. She is the program director for the Education, Dissemination, and Outreach Core within the UCLA Autism Center for Excellence through the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. In addition to being a licensed clinical psychologist, Dr. Laugeson has been the principal investigator and collaborator on a number of nationally funded studies investigating social skills for youth with social difficulties from preschool to early adulthood, and is the developer of Peers, an evidence-based social skills intervention for youth with autism and social challenges. Since 2010, she has authored 4 books related to social skills training, including 3 Peers treatment manuals for mental health professionals and educators, and 1 parent book, The Science of Making Friends. Having trained thousands of mental health professionals, educators, and families in the Peers method, Dr. Laugeson is dedicated to developing and testing evidence-based treatments to improve social skills across the lifespan and disseminating these empirically supported programs around the globe. At present, the Peers manuals have been translated into at least 12 languages, and the program is used in 70 countries. Today, Dr. Laugeson will be presenting what promises to be an interesting and informative lecture on Friendship 101, how to make and keep friends for youth with special needs. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Laugeson.
Well, thank you, Olivia, for that nice introduction. As those of you that come to our lecture series monthly, I'm usually the one doing the introduction, so it's kind of interesting to be on the other side of it, but it's a pleasure to be here and to have you all here this morning. I'm going to be sharing with you some information about a topic that's really near and dear to my heart, and that is how to make and keep friends for kids with special needs or youth with special needs. And in terms of what I'm hoping to talk about this morning, I want to begin with just talking about what are some of the social deficits that we often see among, adolescents and young adults with special needs, and also the importance of improving friendships, because that's a very important topic. And social skills can be very broad. We do social skills research here, but why would we want to target friendships in particular? That's just one area of social skills. I think I've got a mic here, thank you though. From there we'll also talk about consequences of peer rejection, so not having friends and what could be the problem with that. We'll talk about how to teach social skills. There's effective methods for teaching social skills. I'll share that with you, sort of the formula that we follow. And I'm actually going to give you some intervention tools today. I'm a big proponent of when you come to a lecture, you should be able to walk away with some actual tools at the end of it. And so I'll be teaching you a little bit about how people enter conversations and meet new people. We'll talk about how to handle arguments and disagreements, and also how to handle teasing, which we know can be a big problem for a lot of kids with special needs. I'm not going to go into a lot of the research outcomes, even though this is an evidence-based intervention. We have a lot of research. I will give you some information about our long-term research findings, so how people are doing years after our program. And then I want to leave you with some resources today, so that's sort of the plan. In terms of what we're talking about, though, for social deficits among youth with autism, with other developmental disabilities, other special needs like ADHD, depression, anxiety, we know that poor social communication can be a real big issue, particularly once youth transition into middle school, high school. You know, when you're younger, it's all about play skills and being a good sport, entering play in the playground. But once you hit adolescence, middle school, high school, it's all about having conversations with people. So poor social communication becomes a really big issue for a lot of youth with special needs. For youth with autism in particular, they tend to be sort of repetitive in their themes, talk about the same thing all the time, have difficulty with topic initiation. But, you know, even other kids that aren't on the spectrum kind of struggle with, you know, conversing with other people, having reciprocal sort of two-way conversations. We also know that poor social awareness is pretty common for kids with special needs. They often really don't understand the social landscape that they live in. And, you know, what's interesting about that is that even kids with autism that we tend to work with very often, they'll know about all these different peer groups that exist in their social world. You know, once you hit middle school, remember, there's all these different groups of kids, and they congregate around shared interests, right? So, for example, you got kids that are really into video games. What do we call them? Gamers. Kids that are into technology and computers, what do we call them? Techies, exactly. So interesting thing about youth with special needs, including those with autism, they'll know these groups exist, which we're often fascinated by because they're not known for having good social awareness, but what they don't understand is the function of the groups. In other words, if I'm really into video games, I like to play video games. I actually don't, but let's say I did, and I knew, like, I was really good at it. Who should I be hanging out with? The gamers, right? And how do I identify who is a gamer? What are they doing before and after school and during breaks? They're playing video games. What's on their t-shirt? Little gaming logos, right? They join gaming clubs. I mean, we need to decode the social world for youth with special needs because they'll have bits of information, like maybe knowing the groups exist, but they don't understand why they're important. It's a source of potential friends for us. We know friendships are based on common interests, so we need to look for other people that have things in common. We also know poor social motivation is really common for youth with special needs, so things like less social engagement. Social motivation on the surface sounds like this young person is not motivated to be friends or to be social. But in reality, a lot of the people that we work with, they're very motivated to be social. They want to have friends, they just don't know how to have friends. And so on the surface, it might look like they're not really motivated. They might even have tried in the past to make friends and were unsuccessful and got rejected, and they've kind of given up. So they tend to be less socially engaged is really the bottom line. But many of those youth actually do want to have friends and be social. They just don't know how to. We also know that poor social cognition is another hallmark feature among youth with social challenges. And what that really means is it's a technical term for perspective taking. It's sort of putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and being able to anticipate how they might think, what they might think or what they might feel or how they might react essentially to something that we do. It's putting yourselves in someone else's shoes. And a lot of youth with special needs struggle with social cognition and perspective taking. So this is another area that we have to target in social skills training. So what are some of the consequences of these social deficits? Well, when it comes to social skills training, we typically see two groups of people, and this is across the lifespan. You'll either have youth that are socially neglected or peer rejected. So let's talk about the difference. The socially neglected young people are those who are often seen as shy or timid, kind of withdrawn. And they don't even really go noticed by other people. They're unnoticed. They often are seen like the little wallflowers, and they're not really like even trying to engage other people. And then you have youth that are peer rejected. And these are the young people that they're actively seeking out their peers. They're trying to engage others, but they're doing something that's pushing other people away, right? They're maybe hogging conversations, they're barging into conversations and they're off topic, or they're trying to be funny joke tellers and telling jokes all the time, or, you know, and they often get teased and bullied, and they're being rejected though. They are trying to seek out their peers, but they're getting pushed away. Now, a lot of people will ask, well, how can you tell if someone is peer rejected or socially neglected? Well, we've actually discovered it is quite simple to determine what's going on just based on their diagnoses alone, right? I like to use youth with autism as an example because we know a lot of youth with autism, they're struggling socially, they present for social skills training, but even among youth with autism, they typically have co-occurring or comorbid diagnoses. What are some of their co-occurring diagnoses? Anxiety, what else? ADHD and depression. And if you said OCD, it's like an anxiety disorder, right? So those are the big three, anxiety, depression, and ADHD. So of those groups, Who's more likely to barge into conversations, be off topic, talk about whatever they want to, try to be a funny joke teller? Those with impulse control issues, those with ADHD, more likely to be peer rejected. And who's more likely to not even try to socially engage their peers? The depressed and anxious, yeah. So you don't even have to see them in their social milieu very often to know what's going on socially with them, just looking at diagnoses. Now the good news here is that whether this person is socially neglected or peer rejected, the skills that you should be teaching will be the same. And the reason is that if you're teaching, good social skills, you're essentially teaching what socially successful people naturally do, and it doesn't matter if you're peer rejected or socially neglected. You're just teaching good social skills. What will be different is what they struggle with. What they find challenging will be different. But otherwise, the skills should be the same because you're supposed to be teaching good social skills, and it doesn't matter if you're rejected or neglected. Another issue for a lot of youth that are struggling with social challenges is peer conflict. They get into arguments with their friends. Well, first of all, do young people sometimes get into disagreements and arguments with their friends? Yeah, but if it's not too explosive, if it's not too frequent, it shouldn't have to end a friendship. But for many youth with special needs, especially the ones who have that very black and white thinking, what happens to the friendship when they get into a disagreement? It's over. They just sort of terminate the friendship. Well, why do you think they do that? It's black and white thinking, right? We're either getting along and we're friends, or if we're not getting along, we're not friends. This is very common, particularly among youth with autism. And again, anyone that's got that black and white thinking. It's like we're getting along, we're friends, or if we're not friends. And that's not a practical way to go through life. You're not going to have too many friends if every time you have a disagreement, you end the friendship. So you have to teach them conflict resolution skills and social skills training. And then we also know that just kind of, whether someone's peer rejected or socially neglected, a lot of youth with special needs really struggle with having close, meaningful friendships with other people. Although if you ask most of those young people if they have friends, what will most of them say? Some of them will have the insight to say no, but more often I find that they will say yes. And then you investigate further, and they either can't name anyone that they're friends with, or what will they do? They name everybody, exactly, everybody, but they've never had a get-together with any of those people, right? Exactly. So they don't tend to have those close reciprocal friendships, which is really what we're trying to target in our programs. So why do we target friendship skills? Because we know social skills is very broad. It can include many things, job skills, dating etiquette, you name it. There's so many independent living skills. These are all social skills, but why friendships? Well, we know just having one or two close friends is very predictive of later adjustment in life. And actually just having a couple of friends is really, it buffers stressful life events. Like think about when you have a bad day. Who do you reach out to, right? You talk to a friend. Imagine if you didn't have anybody to talk to. What would that be like? That's a lot of the youth that we're working with. We also know just having one or two close friends correlates positively with things like self-esteem and independence. You feel better about yourself if you have a couple of close friends. And you're more likely to be independent later in life if you have a couple of close friends. You transfer ultimately that dependence that you have in your family, right, when you're younger, often to friends as you get older. Imagine if you didn't have anyone to go to. And then we also know just having one or two close friends is negatively correlated with things like depression and anxiety, which means you're more likely to be depressed or anxious if you don't have a couple of friends. And vice versa, if you have a couple of close friends, you're less likely to be depressed or anxious. This is sort of an interesting finding, and this isn't just among youth with special needs. This is across the board among young people. One of the strongest predictors of mental health problems like anxiety and depression is peer rejection. Okay, one of the strongest predictors. What that means is if you want to predict who's going to be depressed or anxious later in life, go into any typical middle school or high school in North America and look for the kids who are being rejected. And that will be one of the strongest predictors. And I don't think we're doing enough for those kids, right? I mean, there's a lot of kids who are struggling socially. We're not really doing a whole lot for them, unfortunately. We also know that another consequence of peer rejection would be things like poor academic performance, right? Early withdrawal from school, substance abuse. Also things like suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, very strongly predicted by things like peer rejection, not having friends. There's been some really interesting peer sociometric research that's been done over the decades in North America, where they go into middle schools and high schools and they have kids identify who they're friends with, who they like, who they don't like, and they get all these different categories of peer acceptance. And what they've discovered in this research is that about half of kids, about 55%, are in the average range of peer acceptance. What that means is they're doing okay socially. They have friends, they're not particularly popular, but they're doing okay socially. Then you get about another 15 to maybe 17% of kids that are popular. Now, popular doesn't always mean well-liked, right? It means well-known. So you'll sometimes even get some controversial kids in there too, like the bullies and like the gossips and stuff. They're well-known for sure. Then you have another 15% that are peer rejected. These are the ones who are actively seeking out their peers, but they're getting pushed away for some reason. Again, they often get teased, they get bullied, they often have bad reputations. All right, and then on top of that, you have another 15% of kids that are socially neglected, right? They're just kind of going unnoticed. Other people don't notice them, they're not trying to engage anyone. What this tells you is that in any typical middle school or high school in North America, about 1/3 of kids are struggling socially. 1/3. And they don't all have diagnoses that, where they're seeking psychiatric, care. There's just 1/3 of kids are struggling socially. When you think about the consequences of things like peer rejection and not having friends, we could be doing more for these kids. So we know social skills training is pretty common among certain groups of youth with special needs, particularly those in the autism spectrum. Also kids with ADHD often get referred, kids with social anxiety. But unfortunately, the research suggests that most of these programs don't tend to be very effective. And so I think it's useful to think about why are these programs not very effective. Well, one thing you should know is that most of the programs tend to focus on elementary school aged kids, which is fine if you're in elementary school, right? But very few programs focus on adolescents or adults. Do you think the social skills you need in grade school are a little bit different than the ones you need in middle school and high school and on into adulthood? Absolutely. We're not keeping up with the social demands, sadly, with these programs. Another issue, too, is most of these programs do not use evidence-based curricula, meaning that they're just kind of putting stuff together and maybe teaching what they think that kids should do in social situations rather than what works. Or they go to Amazon and type in social skills training and they see what pops up, right? Or maybe if you're lucky, they're looking at the ratings or something like that, or how popular is it? Unfortunately, though, if you go to Amazon and you type in social skills training, you're only going to get a couple or a few evidence-based curricula that are going to pop up. And I think that's important to note because a lot of people give providers and school, educators a lot of flack for not using evidence-based curricula, and I would argue it's because they don't have access to it. Because very, very few programs that are evidence-based social skills programs have published manuals. So people just, get what they get. They use what's out there. And unfortunately, the problem with that is that very few of these programs are teaching ecologically valid social skills. And this is by far my biggest pet peeve with social skills interventions, is they're not teaching ecologically valid skills. In other words, teaching what socially successful kids are naturally doing. Right? That's ecologically valid. What do successful people do? We need to teach that. Instead, most programs are teaching what adults think that kids should do, rather than what actually works in reality. So I'm going to give you several examples of that this morning, and how we often give bad advice, unfortunately, in social situations. And we need to overcome that by, again, figuring out, well, what do socially successful people do? Let's teach that. We also know very few programs sort of just tailor their programs to the cognitive style or the strengths and weaknesses of the kids and the adults that they're working with. So I mentioned black and white thinking a moment ago, right? A lot of the youth that we work with special needs have that very dichotomous black and white thinking. So in that example, they tend to be a little bit more literal, right? Very focused on rules and things like that. They're very literal, very concrete. Do you think you want to use analogies and metaphors and figurative use of language? No, they're not going to get it. It's too abstract. You need to be very black and white because that's how they think. And because they're very black and white, they love rules. If you ever noticed that, particularly youth with autism, other youth with black and white thinking, love rules. They love to follow rules. They also notice when other people break rules, right? They point out rule violations all the time. We call it policing. So we want to teach to their cognitive style. So we have to break everything down into concrete rules and steps of social skills. That's how you teach social skills, right? Concrete rules and steps of what we all kind of naturally might do. We also know that very few programs include homework assignments. Now think about that. Why would that be a problem in social skills training not having homework assignments? There's no practice. There's no follow through. It's like you're going to assume that they're just going to use the skills outside of the group. You can't make that assumption. You have to actually give them assignments to practice. And they may not get it right away. So that's why you also have to follow up with the homework assignments and review that. This is also where you individualize the treatment. One of the biggest criticisms of manualized treatments is that they're one size fits all. I think we all know that very little in life is one size fits all, right? But if you're using ecologically valid social skills, you have this whole menu of social skills that seem to work. And if they don't work, we can individualize that through homework review. Tell me what's working, what's not working. Let's troubleshoot this. That's how you individualize a manualized program, is homework review. Just making sure that things are working, and if they're not, troubleshoot it. We also know very few programs include parents or teachers or caregivers. Now think about that. Why would that be a problem in social skills training, not to include parents, caregivers, educators? I know, exactly. I mean, in our program, we see our families for 16 weeks, once a week for 90 minutes. This is not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things, but parents, teachers, other, caregivers, they're out there the majority of the time. Why not train them to be good social coaches, the way that I would be or anyone on my team would be if we were there? And also, we're not working at cross purposes either. They're given good social advice, right, rather than giving the bad advice that we'll talk about in a moment. And then finally, very few programs that are out there even test themselves to see if they're effective, right? They don't actually do pre-post outcome, sort of assessments, and also don't test the durability of their treatment games over time. It's important that, kids and adults are doing well after a social skills intervention, but do you also want to know how they're doing months and years later? I do. If they're not continuing to do well months or years later, we need to fix something. Because I actually don't believe that people should have to be in social skills training every single week for the rest of their lives. And that's sort of the model that's out there, particularly for people on the spectrum. They're just supposed to go to a social skills group for the rest of their lives. If you include other care providers in the treatment, you don't have to do that. Right? Teach them a core set of skills, get them a social coach out there in the real world, and they can actually work independently with that person. That's how you sort of sustain a program, because the program never ends. If you have a parent or some teacher or other caregiver that's involved with this person's life, they can provide that coaching after the program ends. All right, so in terms of just to sort of, this is how we came up with the idea to develop the peers intervention, was that there weren't programs like this out there in the community. And just so you know the background, Peers was developed back at UCLA back in 2004, and it was initially developed as a program for adolescents on the autism spectrum, so middle school, high school kids. But we discovered very quickly that the skills we were teaching to those youth with autism, they applied to other kids who were struggling socially. So we started including other youth with special needs, kids with ADHD, depression, anxiety, intellectual disabilities. We also discovered very quickly that we had developed this parent-assisted program, but there were a lot of parents that weren't willing or able to participate in the program, but a lot of schools were providing social skills training. So we thought, well, we need to develop a school-based curriculum. And so we did that. And then from there, we discovered, wait a second, a lot of the skills we're teaching to adolescents, they apply to adults too. And so then we developed a young adult program. And since then, we've developed a number of other programs. We have a preschool program for kids 4 to 6 years of age. We have a dating curriculum that we're currently developing and testing. And we also have a new program called Peers for Careers, which is a college to career transition program. If you were at our lecture last month with Dr. Amanda Goldsrud, you heard a little bit about that program that we're developing. And additionally, we've also done other research programs. Right now, we're conducting a study using L-DOPA, which I'll tell you a little bit more about, in combination with our parent-assisted adolescent and young adult program. But at present, Peers, as Olivia mentioned, is in over 70 countries, and it's been translated into over a dozen languages. It's not just enough, though, to translate a social skills intervention, right? You have to culturally adapt it based on sort of what the norms are in that society. So it's a complicated process. I'm happy to share how that works a little bit later if you have questions. But again, we're also very, very dedicated to disseminating this program outside of even UCLA. What makes Peers rather unique, before we sort of get into the curriculum, is that it's one of the only evidence-based social skills interventions out there with a published manual that people can access, so actually multiple published manuals. It's parent or caregiver assisted, meaning that we're, again, including social coaches in the process. We're only teaching ecologically valid social skills, what we know through research works in social situations, and again, we're culturally adapting it in other parts of the world. Now, the way we teach social skills is not, it's not just what we're teaching, it's how we're teaching. So the way we teach social skills is equally important to what we're teaching. And this is the formula that we follow. So we use a small group format, typically about 10 to 12 young people in a group. And why do you think we would want to use a small group format to teach social skills rather than individual treatment? You can practice it, you can use it with those other people. It's not a friendship matching group. They're not there to make friends with each other. They're there to practice with each other. We also have the didactic lesson, so there's concrete rules and steps of social skills. And we're also using what we call a Socratic method. We're not lecturing to them. We're actually asking questions in a certain way that they're giving us the rules and steps. Or we're doing role play demonstrations. We're acting things out. We're saying, hey, watch this. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. And then you might demonstrate, hogging a conversation or something. And you time out, ask what did you do wrong, and they'll tell you that you didn't let that person talk. And you create a rule around that. Don't be a conversation hog. That's a Socratic method. We're not telling them what they should or shouldn't be doing. They're telling us. Okay. Another important aspect, again, is that role play demonstration, but you don't just do good and bad examples of what to do in social situations. You have to get into the mind of the other person. That's perspective taking. So we do a lot of perspective taking questions. And then from there, they have to practice these newly learned skills. And so that's a behavioral rehearsal where they're not practicing the good way of doing things. We're giving them coaching right there in the moment, performance feedback. And then in order to generalize the skills outside of our treatment setting, we're going to give homework assignments, right? And it's not just enough to give the assignment. You got to follow up on it the next time you see them. And hopefully have some social coaching out there in the real world with this parent or caregiver, the teacher, whoever happens to be involved as their social coach. So that's the formula that we follow for teaching social skills, all based on what research tells us works in teaching social skills. Now, these are the skills that we actually teach. So we start with talking about things like finding and choosing good friends, or even in our young adult program, we talk about dating etiquette and finding romantic partners. We talk about conversational skills, starting and entering conversations, exiting conversations. Talk about electronic communication, appropriate use of humor. In our teen program, we talk about things like good sportsmanship. And as I mentioned in our young adult program, we talk about dating etiquette. So that would include things like, flirting with someone, letting someone know that you like them, asking someone on a date, accepting rejection, turning someone down, all these different aspects of dating we go over, as well as things like handling unwanted, sexual pressure or dating pressure from a partner. The intervention is really kind of focused on two types of skills. We talk about the making and keeping friends or romantic partners, and then there's the managing conflict and rejection. So in dating, it's again, accepting rejection or turning someone down, handling unwanted, sexual pressure. But we also talk about handling arguments and disagreements, as well as changing a bad reputation. Some of our kids and our adults are not, very well liked by their peers. We need to work on changing that reputation. And then also how to handle bullying. Now, the term bullying is used pretty generally to describe some pretty distinct behaviors. And according to research, there's essentially 4 types of bullying, right? So there's verbal bullying. What do you think that includes? Name calling, teasing, right? Making fun of someone. There's physical bullying. What do you think that includes? Pushing, hitting, kicking. But among adults, you could get arrested for that. So it's a little different with adults. It's pranking someone, pulling practical jokes, maybe stealing from someone or exploiting someone in some way. Okay, there's also what we call electronic bullying, but more often referred to as what? Cyberbullying, exactly. And then there's also relational bullying, and we want to guess what that is?
Gossip?
Yeah, rumors and gossip, exactly. Social exclusion, we're not friends with you. Anyone want to guess who engages in more of that relational bullying?
Girls.
Yeah, females, exactly. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean males don't do that, but it's kind of the mean girls kind of bullying. Well, those are 4 very different types of behaviors. Do you think we have different strategies for handling those different types of bullying? We should, if we're doing our job right, completely different strategies based on what type of bullying it is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you a little bit, like little glimpses of what we teach in social skills, how we teach it. And I'm going to start with entering group conversations, because this is really how people meet new people. But it's interesting because if you ask your typical, kid or even adult how they're told to meet new people, what do you think most of them will be told to do to meet new people? Like they're going to some party or get together, they don't know anybody. What are they told to do?
Just go introduce yourself.
Go introduce yourself. Go up and say hi. Have you ever thought about what that would look like? Right? Walk up to, hi, I'm Liz. Right? Interrupt your conversation. What would you think of me if I walked, hi, I'm Liz? I'm weird. That's a weird thing to do. That's not what people naturally do, but that is what most young people are told to do. Go up and say hi. Go up and introduce yourself. That's not what we're naturally doing. And I think the problem is that social skills are so automatic to most of us, we don't even think about what we're doing. right? We're just doing it. So it's really easy to give bad advice, right? And we don't even realize it. Just because you have good social skills does not mean you know how to teach good social skills, because it's happening so automatic for all of us. Okay, now go back to those peer rejected and socially neglected young people. Now, what was the diagnosis of the peer rejected typically? ADHD, impulse control issues. What mistake do you think they might make in trying to enter conversations? Barge in and talk about what?
What they like.
Whatever they want to talk about, exactly. And do you think they're going to be accepted in that conversation? No. Now, what are the co-occurring diagnoses of the socially neglected? Anxiety and depression. What are they likely to do in those situations? You'd stay quiet, do nothing, right? They won't even try to socially engage. And they might even want people to come talk to them, but their body language isn't very inviting, right? They're usually on the side of the room, and where are they usually looking? Like down at their feet, and it's not really inviting to other people, so they don't notice and they don't engage them. All right, so instead, we don't want to do these things. And we also need to start this skill with a bad example of what not to do. We do a lot of bad role plays in our program, and some people are surprised by that. Like, why would you show bad examples? Why do you think we need to show some bad examples of what not to do?
So they can see what not to do.
Exactly, they're probably doing those things. They need to see what it looks like, get into the mind of that other person. So this is going to be a bad example of what we don't want to do. And I would say you're going to see a group of people talking, and then you're going to see this young woman, Alina, enter the shot here, try to enter the conversation. And I want you to notice what Alina is doing wrong in entering this group conversation.
Hey Jordan, you'll never guess, I saw Dave at my favorite sushi restaurant this weekend.
No way, what restaurant was it?
Just the one right around the corner.
Oh, I've been meaning to try that place.
Yeah.
It's so close by. I feel bad that I'd never gone, but I went and it was so good.
Nice, what did you guys get?
I got the spicy tuna with crispy rice.
Yeah, it looked awesome. Have you guys ever been roller skating? Sorry, I just got the regular salmon. There's this new skate park that just opened up. It's really fun.
What did you get?
Just the salmon roll. It was plain. They have a Thursday night student night. A lot of people go to it.
I've been meaning to go there. I've been wanting to try it out.
It's really fun. There's also this other place
What would you
by the
get if
beach
you went?
that I've been roller skating.
I'm sorry, what?
What would you get if you went?
It's really cool. It's like right by the water, and lots of people go.
Okay, so you would demonstrate what not to do here. You would time out, and then you would ask, what did Alina do wrong? So you guys tell me, what did she do wrong? We're clear that was wrong, right? Good. What'd she do wrong?
She just butted in and interrupted.
Yeah, she barged in. She was off topic, just the stuff that you predicted that someone might do. And what do you think that was like for that group? Annoying, uncomfortable. What do they think of Alina?
Not interested.
She's weird. They're not interested in her. She's obnoxious. Will they want to talk to her again after that? No. Could she even get a bad reputation for doing this if she keeps doing that? Absolutely. So this is not what we want to do. So we start with the bad example first. They need to see what that looks like. And the interesting thing about youth with special needs is if it's not them making the mistake and they see someone else do it, they can tell you what's wrong with what just happened. But we also need to get into the mind of the other person. Why was that a problem? What was wrong with that for the group? All right, now we need to get into the ecologically valid social skills, things that you are all naturally doing. You just don't realize that you're doing this. So the first thing, I'm going to advance the slide second, but let's go through. I'm going to use a Socratic method with you guys, and let's see if you can come up with the steps that you actually naturally follow. So first thing you're doing before you enter a conversation is you're doing something with your eyes and your ears. What are you doing?
Spying.
You're kind of spying, yeah, but you don't want to look like you're spying. You're basically eavesdropping.
Right.
You're listening to the conversation, you may be watching for a distance, but you don't want to look like the creepy stalker over in the corner, like staring at the group. So you're usually using a prop, right? Something to look distracted by. What will most people use to look distracted by? Their phone, exactly. A phone is a great prop. The prop needs to make sense, though. A phone is probably the best thing. Looks like you're looking at text or something. I have like my tea mug here, right? But it's a prop, but I'm just going to stare at my tea mug. It's got the prop needs to make sense, right? I suppose I could sort of be chilling with my tea, but I don't know. Probably better to have a phone or something, reading material or something like that. But you're using a prop, and as you're listening, what are you trying to identify?
What they're talking.
The topic, exactly. Do you think I need to know something about that topic before I go enter it? Yeah. What could be the problem with entering on a topic that you don't know anything about? I mean, okay, so imagine the group is talking about like astrophysics or something, and I don't know, clearly don't know anything about astrophysics. Should I try to join that conversation? No, I'm going to slow that conversation down, right? It's going to be boring for them. It's going to be boring for me. Believe me, I could come up with a lot of questions about astrophysics, but it's boring because I don't, so I have to have a common interest. I have to know something about it. Doesn't mean I have to be an expert, but just know a little something. And let's say I want to join the conversation. I've decided I have a common interest. Am I going to yell from across the room? No, what do I need to do instead with my body? Kind of move closer, yeah. What's an appropriate distance to stand from a group of people or even a person? About an arm's length away, exactly. That's what we find as about an arm's length. What am I not going to do as I walk up to the group? Put out my arm and measure, right? I learned that the hard way, so you got to clarify. So we're going to ballpark it, all right? So I don't want to barge into the conversation, right? So what do I need to wait for? Little pause in the conversation. By the way, are you noticing the Socratic method I'm using with all of you? You guys are coming up with these steps. I'm not telling you, you're telling me this is what you're going to do with the teens and the adults you work with, right? Okay, so I'm going to wait for a little pause. Is there ever a perfect pause? No, I'm just trying not to interrupt too much. Best time to join is when one person stops talking, another person's starting to talk. And then what do I want to mention? Something that they're talking about, right? To mention the topic. So you can do that in one of three ways. You can either make a comment, you can ask a question, or you give a compliment. Now, once I've done that, do you think I need to pay attention to whether or not it seems like they want to talk to me? Yeah. Well, I always ask this question, but how can you tell if somebody or a group of people want to talk to you?
They look at you and engage.
Very good, Will. Exactly. They're looking at you, right? What are they doing with their body? They're facing you, not giving you the cold shoulder, kind of turning away, and they're actually talking to you, right? And not giving short replies or rude comments. Those are the three behavioral signs that you can tell if someone wants to talk to you. Are they looking at you? Are they facing you? Are they talking to you? Could you teach a kid with special needs to pay attention to those behaviors? Yeah, but most people, when you ask them, how can you tell if somebody wants to talk to you, they'll say, oh, it's a feeling that you get. All right, sure, maybe for us it's a feeling. For them it's not a feeling. They don't have that same feeling. There are concrete behaviors that you're picking up on that give you the feeling. That's what we have to break everything down into the behaviors. And then let's say we've been talking for a little while. It seems like it's going well. We've never met this group before. What can we do now? Introduce ourselves. And how do you do that? By the way, I'm Liz. Or I don't think I've met you guys before. I'm Liz, right? It's optional. You don't have to do that. But if they're going to be introductions, they come later. Right? So those are the steps, the ecologically valid steps for entering a group conversation. But if we didn't really break this down and know the research, it'd be really easy to give bad advice. Go up and say hi. Go up and introduce yourself. That's not actually what people are doing.
Because they're assuming that they already know all this stuff. So when they're saying it, they're forgetting all these
The 9 steps before.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And by the way, 10 steps looks like a lot. Really, it's kind of 4. Okay? It's watch and listen. You move closer, you wait for a pause, you say something on topic. But if I just tell people the 4 steps, they don't teach all this other stuff. And these are important sub-steps, using a prop and having a common interest. That. So now if we're following the formula that we've established for teaching social skills, we have done a bad role play, followed by perspective taking. We've taught the ecologically valid steps for entering a group conversation using the Socratic method. What is the next step in our formula for teaching this? Exactly, you got to do a good role play. You can't just talk about social skills, you have to see what they look like or what they shouldn't look like. So you'd introduce this by saying, watch this role play, think about what Alina is doing right this time in entering this group conversation.
So Jordan, you'll never guess I saw Dan at my favorite sushi restaurant this weekend.
Nice. What restaurant was it?
Just the one right around the corner.
Oh, I've been meaning to check that place out.
Yeah, it's so close by and I've never gone, but I went. It was really good.
Cool. What did you guys get?
I got a spicy tuna roll and I loved it.
You got the spicy tuna roll? That's what I always get.
Yeah, how good is it?
It's so good there. Have you guys tried the rainbow roll there? I haven't. No, I actually got the salmon roll. Oh, okay. That's good too. But yeah, the rainbow rolls is their specialty.
I'll try it.
Yeah.
If you were going to go, what'd you get?
Probably the California roll. It's my favorite.
I tried that one there actually. It's really good. Nice.
Okay, so you time out, you'd ask which steps did Alina follow, because that's just more repetition of instruction, right? And then perspective taking. What was that like for the group this time? Nice, normal. What'd they think of Alina? Just friendly. Would they want to talk to her again? Yeah, probably. Now, if we're following our formula for teaching social skills, what's the next step? Before the homework even, before they leave our group, what do we need to do? Train the parents and have them practice the skill. So there's a behavior rehearsal. They're going to now practice the skill. We're going to provide some coaching and then give the homework assignment with the parent coaching. And then the next time we see them, We're going to follow up and make sure it works. That's the formula for teaching social skills. You want to follow that. Let's also talk about managing conflict. So we know that arguments and disagreements come up with, friends, and if it's not too explosive, again, if it's not too frequent, it shouldn't have to end a friendship. But what are most young people told to do to handle a conflict, like an argument with a friend? Talk it out. Work it out, talk to them, right? We never teach them how to do that, right? And again, what do most people with social challenges do if they have an argument? If they try to talk it out, they can't manage this. It's difficult for socially successful people to manage arguments and disagreements, so we need to teach them conflict resolution skills. All right, so there's two sides to this. There's sort of handling a disagreement, like if someone's upset with us. And then there's like, what if we're upset with somebody that's bringing up a disagreement? I don't have time to go over both, but I'm happy to share the other side of it if you're interested. But I'm going to talk about responding to disagreements. Now, I want to tell you the research on this because it's kind of interesting. This is really sadistic research that's been done on how people manage conflict. What they do is they'll put friends, even couples sometimes, in a room, and they'll videotape them. They'll have them pick kind of a hot topic. Like something, and that's the sadistic part, right? They're going to have them have an argument, basically. But like pick a topic that just doesn't feel resolved, try to work it out. And then when you feel like it's about as worked out as it's going to be, they sequester them, they have them rate how resolved the argument is. And in this very sadistic research, what they've discovered is that there's very specific steps that people follow for resolving conflict. And you have to follow all the steps, or the argument's not going to be over. It's not going to feel resolved. So these are the general steps for responding to a disagreement if someone's upset with us. First step is we have to keep our cool. Can't lose your cool, can't get upset. Have you ever been in an argument where someone loses their cool? What happens to that argument? Oh, it escalates, right? Now you're arguing about how they're talking to you or how you're talking to them. So you got to keep your cool, and you need to listen to what the person said. A lot of people don't like to do that in arguments. They want to talk about their side, explain their side. No, you need to listen first, and you need to repeat what they said. Now this is technically referred to as active empathic listening, right? Because the thing is, you could be sitting there listening, making good eye contact, shaking your head, looking like you're listening, but until you repeat what they said and summarize or kind of paraphrase, they don't feel heard. And they're going to keep telling you why they're mad, right? So you actually have to sort of repeat what they said. Now, in our groups, we've found that this is kind of the hardest step for a lot of our youth with special needs. They have trouble with that perspective taking and, kind of empathically responding. So this is one time, very, very few times we ever do this. We give them a little sentence stem that they can use if they're not sure how to, repeat what the person said. And the sentence stem that we'll often give them is, it sounds like, and then fill in the blank. Or it seems like, fill in the blank. Or if I understand, like fill in the blank. And it's pretty basic. If they can do better, go for it. But a lot of our young people can't do a lot better than that. So it seems to be good enough to let the person know that they've been heard. It sounds like you're really upset. Or it seems like I really hurt your feelings, or something like that. Fourth step is most people's favorite step. They get to explain your side. But you don't just explain your side. You explain your side using I statements, right? What are I statements versus you statements?
Taking ownership for how you're responding.
That's right. It's I felt this way when this happened. I thought this. It's ownership of your own side of it versus you did this, you did that, you made me feel da 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 da. How do people respond to you statements in arguments? Get defensive, right? Exactly. And they don't want to hear what you have to say. So you need to use I statements in these situations. And then, do you think you need to say you're sorry? Yeah, if you, Will's like, yes you do. Because if you don't say you're sorry, the argument's not going to be over. And a lot of people don't like to say they're sorry. And why do you think a lot of people don't like to say they're sorry? What are they afraid that it sounds like?
Nobody likes to be wrong.
They think that they're saying they're wrong, or they're accepting, like, you don't have to say, that doesn't mean you're saying you're wrong. Or you could say, I'm really sorry this happened, or I'm really sorry that, I upset you, or I'm really sorry. There's ways of saying this without accepting that you did something wrong, but you have to say you're sorry if you want it to be over. And is it enough just to say sorry? Absolutely not. What are they going to say or ask if you just say sorry?
Now what?
What are you sorry for? Like, you're not sorry. It doesn't sound sorry if you just say sorry. You have to say what you're sorry for. And then this final step, I think, is what a lot of people don't either know to do or forget to do, and that is you need to try to solve the problem. Because in arguments and disagreements, there's a little rupture in the trust. And you need to let this person know that you're not going to do that again, or you're going to try not to let that happen again. You need to try to fix it in some way. And it's often not fixing what already happened. You can't often fix what already happened, right? But you can talk about what you'll do differently next time, or you can ask them to do something differently next time, or you can ask them what they need you to do, right? But you need to try to solve the problem. And if you don't do all these steps, the argument's not going to be over. For example, have you ever been in an argument or disagreement that just kept going on and on? And it just didn't seem like it wanted to end? you probably didn't follow all the steps, or the person you were talking to didn't follow the steps. Imagine you're in an argument with someone and they keep saying over and over, you don't get it. Seriously, you don't understand, and they keep telling you why they're mad. Which step did we not follow? Repeating what they said. They don't feel heard. Right? What if they keep saying, you know what, I don't get it, I don't understand why you did this. Which step did we not follow? Explaining our side not sufficiently, they don't get it. What if they say, you know what, I don't even think you care. You don't even seem to be bothered. Which step did we not follow? Just didn't apologize, didn't say we were sorry. They don't feel like feel bad about it. And what if they say, how do I know you're not going to do this again? How can I even trust you? Which step did we not follow? Yeah, I think people are telling us what they need from us in arguments and disagreements, but if you don't know what the steps are, it's really easy to forget this. By the way, how many of you are thinking about your significant other right now? Right? You don't have to have special needs to benefit from this skill, right? I mean, these are life skills everyone needs. All right, so if you're going to do a role play around this is what we recommend. You can't just show the whole 6 steps in succession, because what we've discovered is they don't get that you have to follow all the steps. And they'll think that these are more like rules rather than steps. So they'll say, well, saying you're sorry never works. Well, that's true if that's all you're doing. Right? Or explaining your side never works. That's true if that's all you're doing. You have to do all of them. So the way we introduce this in our groups is we start with going over all the steps, and then we say, watch this role play, think about which steps I'm following, and you just do the first couple steps. And you time out, you ask which steps you followed, and then you ask, does it feel like the argument's over? I'll say no. And then you start at the very beginning of the argument, but this time you add another step. And you time out and you ask which steps you followed. Does it feel like the argument's over? This is all the way down to all 6 steps. This is the only way we've been able to sort of identify or demonstrate that you have to follow all the steps for the argument to be over. So I'm going to show you an example of all the steps rather than kind of breaking it up, but just wanted to let you know that you want to break it up to sort of show little elements of each of these steps. So we'd say, watch this role play and think about which steps Alina's following to respond to a disagreement.
Alina, where were you this weekend? We were supposed to hang out and go to the movie, and I went and I waited for you, and you completely stood me up, and I ended up staying all alone on a Friday night. It completely ruined my night. I don't understand what happened.
It sounds like you're really upset.
I am really upset. I turned on other plans so that we could hang out and catch up, and I wanted to see what you've been up to, and then I ended up just doing nothing on a Friday night except for standing alone and watching people stare at me.
Well, what happened is that I actually lost my phone this weekend, and you know how my calendar, my contacts, and everything is in my phone, and I actually thought that we had plans to hang out this weekend, not last weekend, so that's what happened.
I mean, I didn't need my calendar to remember we had plans. We talked about it, and I had been looking forward to it all week, and I really wanted to go. So it doesn't make me feel better that you just didn't remember that we had plans.
I'm really sorry that this happened.
I mean, I'm sorry too. It was a really bad Friday night.
Well, listen, it sounds like you haven't seen the movie still, and I haven't seen the movie either, and I would really love to make it up to you and go this weekend if you still want to, and this time I'll totally be there. I'm really looking forward to it. So would you want to go this weekend maybe?
Maybe. I'll think about it.
All right, now notice they didn't hug it out, right? Because that's not really practical. People rarely kind of hug it out at the end of an argument, but you would time out, you'd say, which steps did Alina follow? You go through all of them, and then you do some perspective taking. That was Allison, that was on the sort of the person who was upset. What do you think that was like for Allison in the end?
Felt heard.
She felt heard, she got it, it was a mistake, right? She wasn't happy she got stood up, but she got it. What did she think of Alina in the end? She made a mistake, right? She felt bad about it though, but she, it wasn't intentional. And would she want to hang out with Alina again in the future? Maybe, probably. This is the interesting thing though about arguments and disagreements. A lot of people will say that if you can resolve an argument or a disagreement with a friend or a romantic partner, and you can kind of handle it maturely and respectfully, it can actually strengthen your friendship or your relationship. And some of you are shaking your heads because you know what I'm talking about. Why would that be? Why would an argument, but handled appropriately, actually strengthen a friendship or a relationship?
Because you've gone through something difficult together.
Yeah, you went through something difficult together and you got through it. And you appreciated that they respected you. And there's going to be disagreements. We all know that, right? But if you can kind of handle it maturely and respectfully, you trust them more, that you'll be able to get through that in the future. So a very important life skill, not just for friendships. How about work relationships? How about any kind of you need to know how to sort of follow the steps. Okay, last skill I want to teach you before we sort of wrap things up is handling teasing. Now this is one of those skills where kids and adults, they get really, really bad advice all the time. I mean, it's shocking how bad this advice is. What do you think that most kids or young people are told to do in response to teasing?
Just ignore them.
Ignore it. What else? Go tell a teacher or a grown-up, or go walk away. I ask every group of kids and adults that I work with this question. They always say ignore, walk away, tell an adult. Then I ask them if it works. And what do you think they say?
Nope.
No, because none of those things are ecologically valid, right? Okay, so imagine that Olivia is teasing me. I'm sure she would never do that, but imagine she were teasing me and I ignore her. What will she do? Keep teasing me, yeah, and I look weak because I didn't do anything. Am I more or less likely to be teased by Olivia? More likely. I made it easy, right? What if I walk away? What will Olivia do? Follow me, keep teasing me. And again, I look weak because I didn't do anything. Am I more or less likely to be teased by Olivia? More likely. And if I go tell somebody, I go tell Will, what is Olivia going to want to do now? Retaliate against me, get back at me. I tried to get her in trouble, right? These are not ecologically valid social skills. And by the way, don't feel bad if you've been telling kids to do this, because everybody tells kids to do this. This happens across the planet. I don't care where I'm doing a training. Every area on the planet, kids are told to ignore, walk away, or tell an adult. And everywhere on the planet, they say it doesn't work. It's like a whole epidemic of bad advice. It's terrible. So don't feel bad if you've been saying that. Everybody says it. But instead, what we want to do is figure out what socially successful kids will naturally do in these situations. So what's really cool about this skill is this is probably the simplest social skill you could teach them, because it's actually not that difficult to know what to do in these situations if you're socially successful. What most people will do is, you might do this already. By the way, because everybody does get teased, right? It doesn't matter how popular you are. It doesn't matter. Everybody gets teased. It's how you react to it that determines how significantly, severely, how chronically we're teased. So what most people will do is they'll give a short comeback that shows that what the person said didn't really bother them. Right? And maybe what they said was kind of stupid too. Like they'll say things like, whatever, or yeah, or am I supposed to care? Is that supposed to be funny? And your point is, so what? Who cares? Right? What do people do with their eyes? Roll them. What do they do with their shoulders? Shrug them. And it gives the impression that what that person said didn't bother them. That is an ecologically valid social skill, right? Do you think you can teach a kid with special needs to say whatever? Yeah, it's probably the easiest skill you can teach them. And it is so powerful. It works so, so fast. So we need to teach them not to ignore, walk away, or tell an adult, but what do socially successful kids naturally do? And we have to show what it's supposed to look like. So this is going to be Gabe that you're going to see in a moment being teased. And he's not just going to give one comeback, right? One comeback, sometimes they'll stop. Other times they'll keep going. So you got to be prepared with a few comebacks. And they also need to make sense, right? If someone says, Liz, you're so stupid, and I say, am I supposed to care? I'm agreeing with them. That's weird, right? It needs to make sense, whatever we're saying. That's why I love whatever. Whatever works in every situation. I also like anyway, because anyway is a good one, because after you've given a couple or a few comebacks, you can disengage. You can walk away or turn away. You don't have to stand there and take it, right? After you've given a few comebacks. So I love to end with an anyway. I'm like, whatever, and your point is? Anyway, that one feels good to walk away on, right? Everybody's got their thing that they like. But watch this role play. Think about what Gabe is doing right in handling this teasing.
Hey, Dweeb, reading again?
Whatever.
You're such a loser. You're always reading.
Am I supposed to care?
Yeah, because everyone thinks you're a loser.
Anyway.
All right, some of you recognize that was James, too. Such a bully. No, he's not. He's helping us out here. So we time out and say, what did Gabe do right? And then perspective taking. What was that like for James, the person who was teasing him?
Unsatisfying.
Unsatisfying, ungratifying, not expected, right? What did he think of Gabe? Wasn't really bothered, right? And we want to tease him again? Probably not unless it was an extinction burst. An extinction burst is where people will try harder at first because they're used to getting a certain reaction. But eventually, if you keep giving this reaction, it's not going to be fun for them. They're going to probably move on. Okay, so just to kind of wrap things up, those are some of the skills that we teach in peers. Hopefully, you got a good glimpse of sort of the formula that we follow for teaching social skills. But above all else, we need to be teaching ecologically valid social skills. Now, I mentioned that Peers is one of the only evidence-based social skills programs in the U.S. and outside of the U.S. These are some of the the papers that have been published, both in the US and in North America and Canada, but also outside of the US. These are some papers that have been published. I don't have a lot of time to share all of the evidence base, but I did want to share with you kind of my favorite study at the moment, and this is a long-term follow-up study that we did with teens that went through our parent-assisted program 1 to 5 years prior to this study. So there's 3 testing time points, the pre-test, the post-test, and the 1 to 5 year follow-up. What I want to show you here is that this is just kind of looking at social skills, and T1 is the time 1 pretest, T2 is the post-test right after treatment, T3 is the 1 to 5 year follow-up, and notice that everything is sort of moving in the right direction. We took them from the decreased range of social skills to a more average range. Same thing when you look at problem behaviors on the same scale. Nice little decrease from pre to post-test, but it goes down even further 1 to 5 years later. If you look at the subscales of this measure, the social skills rating system, things like cooperation, assertion, empathy, it's going up, self-control is going up, internalizing and externalizing going down. And also in other measures too, the social responsiveness scale, which is an autism screening questionnaire, when these young people come to our program, they're in the severe range of autism symptoms. And these are pretty high functioning youth in terms of like language abilities and cognitive abilities, but they're really impaired by their autism symptoms. And notice we took them from a severe range to a more mild, moderate range, and that maintains beautifully 1 to 5 years later. We also saw nice similar trends on the subscales of this measure, things like social awareness, social cognition, and communication motivation. The autism symptoms are going down. That's what you want. And they're maintaining nicely 1 to 5 years later. Same thing with social engagement. On average, when our teens are coming into our program, they're having about 2 get-togethers a month. Now, when they leave our program, they're having about 4 to 6 get-togethers a month. And these are not with other group members. These are people who are unaffiliated with our program. But when they come back 1 to 5 years later, on average, they're having about 4 get-togethers a month. That's about 1 a week. All right, so they're definitely more socially engaged. And finally, they learned the skills that we were teaching them in peers, and they remembered most of what we taught them even 1 to 5 years later. Now, I want to just pause for a second because this was a 14-week intervention. It meant 90 minutes a week, once a week. That is not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things, and I'm not even taking credit for these findings. What do you think is really going on here? Why are they continuing to do just as well, if not better? That's right, the parent component. I think this is all about the power of parents being involved in treatment, because the program never ended. They still are coaching on all these skills. 14 weeks isn't going to be enough time to have these kinds of results. I think this is about the parents. All right, finally, I just want to share with you, those of you who are mental health professionals or educators, some of you might know we do certified training seminars at UCLA several times a year. And this is our certified training and some upcoming dates for our parent-assisted teen program. For those of you that are trainees at UCLA, we also often will comp registration for these things for our trainees. If you want more information about that, definitely let us know. But we do these several times a year here at UCLA and also outside of UCLA. We also do certified trainings for our school-based program. So this is for educators. That's once a year, usually in the summer. And then a couple or a few times a year, we also do training seminars. They're 3 days again in length, 24 hours total. This is for our young adult program, one of the trainings that's coming up. Additionally, if you're looking for other resources, we have a book called The Science of Making Friends. This is intended for families that can't access a peers program, but it teaches all the skills that we teach in the peers curriculum. We have clinical groups, so those of you that are trainees here, if you want to rotate as an elective through our clinic or work in our programs as a behavioral coach, these are the different groups. If you're just looking for clinical programs for your clients or your patients, we have preschool groups on Tuesdays, adolescent groups back-to-back, 2 groups every Wednesday, and our young adult groups meet on Mondays. And this is throughout the year, so it's on a rolling admission. Every 16 weeks we start a new program. Yeah.
So do you not have an evidence-based program for between the ages of 6 and like middle school?
So that program I would recommend is called Children's Friendship Training. It was also developed here at UCLA. It's for elementary school age children. We're not just trying to reinvent the wheel. It's been done. There is an evidence-based social skills intervention at UCLA. Again, it's called Children's Friendship Training. It's directed by Cynthia Whittam. And so that would be the program that we would recommend. We're not trying to develop programs that sort of already exist. That's an excellent program. And Peers was really developed on that model of a parent-assisted intervention. So a lot of the skills that we teach and the method that we follow is sort of following that curriculum established by Children's Friendship Training. Yeah?
Question. So since it's a 16-week rotation, can a child just jump in there, or they have to start?
It's not a rolling admission because everything, it's lockstep. It's sort of all the skills are building on the previous step. So excellent question. It's a rolling admission. And we're constantly doing intake interviews and screening for the program at all times of the year. When one program ends, or one class ends, another one is beginning. We might take a week off, that's it. But we definitely run groups throughout the year. And there's usually at least 3 cohorts a year, 16-week cohorts, yeah.
So with co-occurring disorders for the adolescent groups, how do you choose which one?
Good question. So we do back-to-back groups on Wednesdays for our teens and back-to-back groups on Mondays for our young adults. And our earlier group is usually mostly people on the autism spectrum, sometimes youth that appear to be a little bit lower functioning for whatever reason. Maybe they have processing issues or executive functioning deficits, language difficulties. The later group is what we would describe as, for lack of a better term, a higher functioning sort of group. But we're very, very mindful of the group composition because we want to make sure that everyone sort of feels comfortable with all of the group members. Yeah.
So the whole peer program is for verbal kids?
Yeah, it's definitely for youth that have maybe average verbal abilities, could be a little bit low average, but they have to be able to, for example, in our preschool program, they have to be able to speak in 5 to 6 word spontaneous phrases and sentences. And it's you saw how many rules and steps there are for things like entering a conversation. So
what about the other kids who are non-verbal but smart?
Yeah. Well, we don't have currently programs for youth that are nonverbal or what we would call pre-verbal. And I think that that's an important area to work on. The only thing I've ever found that's really effective with that population at this point, if they're pre-verbal, is what we call social recreation. Put them in groups of kids that enjoy the same types of activities and game playing. But teaching sort of concrete rules and steps to kids who are pre-verbal is going to be difficult.
But in the real world, it's hard.
Yeah, it is hard.
Kids who are verbal with non-verbal kids.
I wouldn't
try
put.
To make them talk to each
I
other.
wouldn't do that. You're absolutely right. So I would not put kids who are pre-verbal in a group with kids who are verbal.
I mean, they have different kind of
They do.
communication tools, like
Yes.
letterboard, like typing.
I don't recommend that, and I know people do that, and I think it's a mistake. Because we also have to make sure that we're teaching at whatever level they're at, their cognitive level, their language abilities. It should all be sort of, we have to be very, very careful as we screen. That should be a separate type of intervention.
Yeah, is there any evidence-based?
There are no, as far as I know at this point in time, there are no evidence-based social skills interventions for pre-verbal or nonverbal kids, minimally verbal kids. There should be, but I think that so much of the intervention focuses on helping them to develop language. And some of these programs like JASPER, which was developed here at UCLA by Dr. Connie Kazri, Pivotal Response Treatment, Early Start Denver Model, ABA type programs, they'll kind of say, well, we work a little bit on social skills, but in terms of a formal social skills training intervention, at this point in time, that evidence-based program doesn't exist, and it needs to. But I think that there's been so much emphasis on teaching them to communicate first before they sort of tackle that challenge. In terms of some research studies, before I wrap up, we're also doing Peers for Careers. It's our college to career transition program for adults on the autism spectrum. Peers for Dating is a program that we are starting for young adults with autism, teaching them dating etiquette. And then we also have currently a study using L-DOPA, which L-DOPA is a drug used to treat Parkinson's disease. It works in the dopamine system. As many of you know, dopamine is a neurotransmitter that's very much involved with the reward systems. And so we're thinking, well, what if we combined L-DOPA with social skills training? Could we make social interactions more rewarding? And so that's a study that we're currently doing here at UCLA. We also do boot camps. So we have 2-day topical boot camps several times throughout the year, about 6 times a year. They're focused on things like friendships, dating boot camp. We have a bully proofing boot camp that's coming up in just a couple of weeks. They're on Saturdays and Sundays from 9 to 3. They're open to anybody, parents, professionals, teens, adults. Level of functioning will take everybody. It's another way for us to sort of teach these skills to different populations. And then we also have a conversation boot camp. So this is several times throughout the year. The first 2 dates there, we don't have the upcoming dates yet, but if you check our website, you can get more information. I just want to wrap up by thanking this amazing team, by the way, that we have that's involved with doing this research and running these clinical programs. Some of our coordinators are here right now. You guys want to raise your hands so you can sort of see who they're being all shy. They're like this. Put your hands up so that people know. Yeah, please? Okay, in case everyone has any questions. We also have information at the back of the room. And then finally, if you just want more information about our programs, this is our contact information. I know we've run out of time, but I want to just end with thanking Olivia Rayner for allowing me to present our research and our clinical programs here. Thank you all for your attention. I'm happy to stick around if you have additional questions. But thank you.